We listen and we don't judge. Cabin crew edition. Do you see this thing? Well, I'm not gonna lift it for you. But of course, I'm not talking about the small handbags or backpacks. I'm talking about enormous cabin bags. Cabin crew are not obliged to lift your luggage, and it's written in the rules when you're booking your ticket. And there is actually a reason for that. Because if we get injured in the process, we're not going to be covered. So I'm not going to risk my health and lift the luggage of the passengers. I could help you to find the space. I could help you to lift the luggage together, but I'm not going to do it alone. Of course, I would make an exception for people with disabilities or pregnant women. Otherwise, you pack it, you stack it. You might be able to lift it up by yourself, but sometimes passengers bring enormous size of bags, the size of the suitcase, or it could be extremely heavy, and I could actually offload that bag. And the reason being is because, first of all, if the bag is too huge, the overhead compartment will not close. And second thing is that if the bag is really heavy, it could actually exceed the limit of the overhead compartment. So this happened on my flight before, that the head track got open during takeoff because of the weight of the head track. The bag fell out, it injured the passenger. So we'd rather be on the safe side. And in this case, yes, I'm gonna offload your bag in the cargo compartment. And yes, we could be really mean and offload passengers as well. When the aircraft is on ground, I do have the right to offload a passenger with captain's permission, of course. And we usually do observe how people behave. So if you're really drunk or extremely sick or aggressive, more likely you're not gonna fly with us. And yes, I've loaded the passenger before. One guy was verbally threatening other passengers, and guess what? He got escorted out by the police. If you ever worked in retail, restaurants, or in general, if you ever worked with customers, more likely you've been called like this before. I found it really offensive. I could see it, I could hear it, but I choose to ignore it. It's not a rocket science to find the call bell button. However, you could just lift your hand, say excuse me in English, or even in your own language. That's gonna be more than enough to attract the cabin crew attention. So if you address us nicely, we will definitely help you out. Also, when it comes to being nice, there is one interesting thing. Many passengers ask us for freebies or even extra meal, and if the passenger approaches me and asks for something politely, I'll be more than happy to give him extra meal or just something that I could give away for free. However, if they demand in a really rude and offensive language, I'm not gonna do it, even if it doesn't cost anything for me. And I can guarantee you that many crew are following the same rule. So being nice costs nothing, but it pays off. We all know that the seatbelt signs are switched on for takeoff and landing, and turbulence, of course. However, sometimes there is absolutely unmanageable situation in the cabin where all the people are standing, they're drinking, and they're not following the instructions of the crew.
Sit down.
Now, in this case, we could actually call the pilots and ask them for the seatbelt sign and blame everything on unexpected turbulence. Because actually, unexpected turbulence does happen, and we don't want to have passengers injured. This was a demonstration of how one passenger tried to take a picture of me. People take pictures and videos of us all the time, and honestly, crew don't like that. Besides, as per UAE law, it's not allowed to take videos and pictures of us without our consent, and I actually do mind. So I tell people to stop and I ask them to delete the video and the picture, and I actually check if they did that. I understand that you might want to have a picture with the crew or have them in your video, so the simplest thing that you could do, just approach them and ask for permission, and more likely they would not mind. Everybody knows that the seat should be in upright position for takeoff and landing. However, the internet split into two groups when it comes to reclining the seat during the flight. There are so many debates about it. And guess what? I actually vote for the right to recline your seat during the flight. I got called many times to resolve this conflict where one person reclines their seat and another one starts banging on it and they start fighting. Well, I think that people have all the right to recline their seat because it's an amazing feature of the aircraft, so why not? So I would not force people to put their seat upright. The only exception would be is the meal service, when the person behind you would feel uncomfortable to eat because the tray table is a bit inclined. Otherwise, please do so. And honestly, do you really need the cabin crew to resolve this conflict? Nobody likes extra charges, and these days, most of the airlines are charging for the seat selection. I know it sucks and you could just show up at the check-in counter and they're gonna give you the seat for free, but more likely you will not be able to choose. So what I actually do is that I encourage people to check in online. And they do get angry at me as if like I'm putting that money for the seat selection into my pocket. However, if you really want to sit together with somebody, or especially if you have a big family, please do check in online. It's really gonna simplify your life because at the end of the day, crew cannot move the passengers from the original seat if they refuse to move, unless it's safety related. This was supposed to be a seatbelt. I don't have an actual one at home. However, there are so many conflicts about the seatbelt. Oh my god. Believe it or not, there are some people that ignore their own safety and refuse to fasten their seatbelt for takeoff, landing, or turbulence. However, there is a magic trick that usually works for me. I don't usually say it to adults, it's their own choice, but adult people are gonna manage somehow. Maybe. However, when it comes to parents with kids, it's really personal. Like, I am worried for their safety and I don't want the little one to be injured. But some parents are just so ignorant and they refuse to fasten the seatbelt of their baby. So, of course, first I try to explain that it's for their own safety, it's the company policy, and yada yada yada. And most of the times they're not listening. So, there is a shortcut for that. I tell them how their baby could be injured and what could be the consequences. And yes, they get scared, but at the end of the day, if the baby is not injured and they fasten the seatbelt, that works. Guys, just don't ignore the safety rules. I have a confession to make. I lie. Yes, I lie to passengers and I do it quite often. Sometimes passengers ask us for impossible things, and yes, we could explain that we don't have it available and why it's not available and why I'm rejecting this or that. But honestly, sometimes it's just much easier to go back to the galley, our kitchen, take a sip of water, come back and say that I've checked and it's not available. While all this time I knew that the passenger could not get the thing that they're asking for. That was regarding the simple thing, but we lie about more serious stuff as well. Aircraft could have a technical issue while on ground and it's gonna cause a delay. And when people hear that there is a technical issue, they legit freak out. So honestly, unless the captain specifies which kind of technical issue we're facing, sometimes they're just saying there is a technical issue. It's just easier to say that we have a problem with our intercom system or something like that, because if passengers hear that there is a problem with the engine, it's gonna cause panic, chaos, and it's gonna cause more delays. But pilots are in charge of that, and if it is not safe to fly, they would not do that. So there is absolutely no need to panic, but it's just better to avoid it, just in case. It could also concern certain equipment that we have on board, like for example, we had a 2 hours delay because we're waiting for a restraint kit. Yes, we do have a restraining kit on board in case somebody gets violent in flight. And honestly, like if you're a passenger and I tell you that we're waiting for a restraining kit, you're probably gonna freak out, right? So just much easier to say that we're waiting for an oxygen bottle and just get our piece of equipment and take off peacefully and hope for a quiet flight. Do you remember this nightmare? Well, honestly, I wish that we could impose the mask rule on sick passengers up until this date. Yes, I know the mask rule for everybody was really savage. However, some people, they fly really sick and they cause a lot of discomfort to other passengers and even crew. Yes, I get it. Sometimes you get sick and you have to fly, but I really wish that we could force people to wear the mask, because people sneezed in my face countless times and you usually get sick after that. And then you get sick, you lose your flying hours, you lose your money, you get into trouble with the company. Nobody wants that. So sometimes this thing is really useful. Sometimes crew secretly wish that certain flight get cancelled. It could be the destination that we don't really like. We all have our own preferences. However, when we are at a really nice destination and sometimes we have a delay because of the technical issue or weather or something like that, and we have certain legalities, like we could be on duty only up to a certain period of time, and that time differs whether it's the day or night, and sometimes the delay comes really close to the cut-off time, and at this point all the crew just want to stop the duty and get back to the hotel, have a nice rest, and just continue tomorrow with a fresh head. And yes, we know that people will get angry, more likely we're gonna take the same passengers, but sometimes we just really need that reset and have the flight cancelled and just go back to our peaceful sleep. Cabin crew love to sleep. Sometimes when we refer to cabin crew memory, we also say fish memory. And unfortunately, I noticed the effect of flying on myself. I used to have really good memory. I would remember all of the colleagues that I used to fly with. I would remember all the flight numbers. However, it does affect you over time. It comes to a point where we don't remember our colleague names. Yes, we have the briefing before every flight and we introduce ourselves, but sometimes you just don't remember, honestly. Maybe you heard some crew are calling each other babe, honey, Miss Croatia, whatever. Well, you have to be creative, because how are you gonna call other cabin crew when you need them? It's funny, but it's also sad at the same time. So if cabin crew forget your drink order, just don't take it personally. Sometimes we forget where we came from. Like, I kid you not. So, would you judge cabin crew for it, or was it justifiable? Let me know in the comments.